Hello, welcome back to another breaking news update. My name is Jimmy Boyd, and you were watching Boyd News. I want to thank you so much for tuning in today. I've got a very interesting report that I want to go over and share with you today. We're going to be talking about the United States military, and you may have heard reports like this come out before, and I understand this is very similar to many things we probably heard in the past if you live in the United States. So, this report was given to Congress and is from the Commission on the National Defense Strategy, and they warned that the U.S. faces the most serious and most challenging threats in 80 years. Okay, and they're basically not prepared for war, and they believe that war is right around the corner. Okay, so a new report was presented to Congress and the U.S. President Joe Biden, and basically stated that the U.S. is not equipped for a major war. Okay, so that's obviously very dangerous, right? If a major war breaks out, there's going to be huge problems for the United States if they cannot fight this war. Now, there's been lots of talk from many Congress members stating that the U.S. is not spending enough on defense, that we should be spending much higher, maybe, 5, 10% or more of GDP on defense. But right now, I think the U.S. is spending something around 3%. Now, that's higher than many other countries, but considering all the threats in the world, you would think the U.S. would want to be more prepared for that, but the U.S. is not doing that. They're not really focusing on defense. So, some things that I want to talk about here before we get into this article, I've got this pulled up here for you from The Hill. Okay, this came out on July 8th, so roughly about maybe 3 weeks ago or so. It says Defense Secretary continues Sentinel nuclear missile program despite soaring costs. So think about this for a minute. The new Sentinel nuclear missile program. What the U.S. is trying to do right now is upgrade their nuclear deterrence missile system. Okay, like the Minuteman threes and everything. They're starting to become outdated, and they want to start upgrading them to this new Sentinel nuclear missile program. Okay, and because they want to continue doing this, if you notice, they want to push to continue doing this program despite the fact that this program is so expensive. The U.S. is completely broke. Okay, definitely 35 trillion in debt. We just did a whole video talking about economics the other day. We were talking about the U.K. or Britain, but obviously there's many countries that are suffering economically, and the U.S. is one of them right now. Okay, they have a major budgeting and spending problem in the United States, and the national debt is just skyrocketing out of control. So think about this. If the US is having such big economic problems, yet at the same time, they're going to continue this nuclear missile program, obviously they're worried about threats from China, Russia, whatever other countries that might have nuclear weapons as well. And clearly they're worried that the US will fall behind with when it comes to nuclear weapons, and who knows what would happen at that point, right? So that's a very scary sign to show that war is definitely around the corner, and maybe nuclear war is even more potential than just like a world war through conventional means. So let me show you this article here now. So just be prepared. This is a little bit longer of an article that we're going to go over, but there's lots of good information in here that talks about this topic. So this is from Como News. U.S. faces most serious threat of major war in 80 years, and we aren't prepared, says the experts. This came out today. Yesterday, July 30th, 2024. A new report to Congress and the president warns the U.S. is not equipped for a major war. The Bipartisan Commission on the National Defense Strategy warned we face the most serious and most challenging threats in 80 years. The commissioners, who said they were unanimous in their findings, said the U.S. faces the potential for near-term major war. So look at that, near-term major war. And if you look at what I've been reporting in the Middle East right now with Russia and Ukraine, all these wars that are starting to break out, all these potential wars that could break out, China and Taiwan, North Korea and South Korea, the Philippines and China. I mean, it's so tense around the world right now, and there's definitely a major war that could break out. I think most of us understand that if you follow this channel. The nation was last prepared to fight a global conflict during the Cold War, which ended 35 years ago. It is not prepared today, the report states. So 35 years ago, we were supposedly prepared to fight a war. The United States was, that is. Now they're not. Okay, they're not prepared to fight a major war. So Bradley Martin, the director of the RAND National Security Supply Chain Institute, said Tuesday that he agreed with the commissioner's dire assessment. I think that the chances of major power war are unfortunately significant, he said. RAND assisted with the commissioner's report. Defense spending as a share of the U.S. economy has declined since the Cold War. The US spent over 11% of gross domestic product on defense in the 1950s. It was down to about 6% in the 1980s. Now we spend about 3% on GDP on defense. So look at how much it's declined over the last 50 years or so, 70 years. It's gone down quite a bit, all the way down to 3%, up from 11%. Okay, so definitely a lot less spending in the United States on defense. Another RAND expert, Raphael Cohen, mentioned America's diminished defense capacity since the Cold War while discussing dangers related to Israel's Middle East conflicts. Our defense industrial base is struggling for a host of reasons, Cohen said. This goes well beyond Israel and Gaza. It goes well beyond Ukraine. It goes largely to what we did to the defense industrial base after the end of the Cold War. We need to scale that back up again, but we're struggling under that. Martin, a retired Navy captain, said today's American military does a good job with its day-to-day tasks, but the real lack of preparation is in the fact that the defense industrial base has shrunk, Martin said. The military recruitment struggles have gotten a lot of attention, but we also don't have the technically trained workforce or the factory capacity to make the munitions and critical spare parts for our combat vehicles, he said. One of the bad habits, I would call a bad habit of military services, is they want to build a few really, really expensive things because of the belief that, well, I've got all this capability, you know. One of these can take on 7 of something else, Martin said. But effective deterrence takes combat capability stationed in lots of different places, standing by and ready to roll in the event of a crisis. They don't have to necessarily be 4 billion destroyers to be an effective deterrence, Martin said. Quantity has a quality of its own. So he's stating that we should be focusing on quantity, not so much quality. And then that kind of ties into this whole Sentinel nuclear missile program. That's they obviously want to start working towards this and building this new nuclear missile program. And obviously, if they're more concerned about building this versus focusing on fixing the economy of the country, then obviously there's a major threat in terms of nuclear as well. So there are probably some efficiency savings that could be achieved within the Defense Department, Martin said, but increasing America's defense capacity won't be free. Increased defense spending could be paid for by reductions to existing government programs or increased taxes, which Martin acknowledged might not be a popular, politically palatable solution. I guess I would just say that the defense capabilities that we're talking about are what underwrite stability and prosperity, he said. That's a collective good, you know. That's something that people don't notice until it goes away. Martin said the many trillions of dollars we spent over the decades on our military is a relatively small price to pay for what has provided our country. The isolationist impulse is certainly understandable, but I think that comes from a failure to recognize how much U.S. prosperity has depended on a stable global environment, Martin said. The U.S. was better positioned before World War II to quickly ramp up capacity than the country is now, he said. We had excess industrial capability and more available labor coming out of the 1930s than we do in 2024. That's all the more reason to take action now in peacetime to build up our defense capacity, he said. Threats loom from Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and others. To a degree, we may find ourselves surprised by what the next big thing is, Martin said. He doubts Russia will want to take on NATO or all of Europe, and China likely doesn't want to risk the economic calamity that could come from invading Taiwan. The Middle East can be more unpredictable, and that's dangerous, he said. It is also a region that could prove so valuable to other nations that a spark in the Middle East could ignite a conflict that spills far outside the part of the world. China, for example, has interests in Africa, and it receives energy from the Middle East. Plus, there's a danger that a U.S. adversary could try to take advantage if they think America is distracted by conflict elsewhere. So I actually mentioned this in my video this morning. Okay, we did some updates regarding the Middle East conflict that's happening. We had the top Hamas leader in Iran that was eliminated, Ismail Haniyeh. Okay, and I talked about in that video, I said, imagine if the U.S. got tied up in a conflict with Iran and all the proxies in the Middle East. This would give the opportunity for, let's say, Russia to maybe finish off Ukraine or continue pushing harder in Ukraine, because now all their assets and all their bombs and everything are no longer going to Ukraine, let's say, for example, because now they're going down to the war effort in the Middle East to fight against Iran. This could push, Russia to want to continue their war in Ukraine. This could also push potentially North Korea to maybe attack South Korea, and also China to invade Taiwan, or maybe to attack the Philippines, or whatever it might be. Some of these other wars that could potentially break out could now break out because now we've got the U.S. tied up in other conflicts that to other countries, they'll look at this and be like, this is my prime opportunity to take advantage of this. So finally, it says right here, that starts to become a problem where countries are taking sides, then we're dealing with a world war. Okay, so obviously he's talking about all these other countries like North Korea and Russia, and if they all take a side and kind of team up against the US and NATO, whatever, then yes, now we've got a world war. If let's say maybe Iran goes to war with Israel here very soon, and then the U.S. gets involved, this could drag Russia into it, and they start taking sides, and then before we know it, now we've got a world war breaking out. But definitely, I mean, this report definitely has some common sense to it, okay? But I understand that some people might see this and look at it as maybe fear-mongering, and I understand that too. But definitely look at what's happening like down in the Middle East right now. Look at what's been happening with Russia and Ukraine. There's just really wars just breaking out all over the place. And obviously there's a lot of things that could be to blame for that, whether it's politics, whether it's economy, whether it's, whatever you want to tie to it, really. Regardless, we've got wars breaking out all over the place, and these could definitely at some point turn into a major war, whether that be a regional war or a world war. And clearly the U.S. there's been lots of reports on this that the U.S. is not prepared to fight a major war if that happens, and many people could probably agree with that. The U.S. is just definitely not what it used to be. The military has been scaled back tenfold, whether that's economically or even many political issues happening within the U.S. military, even just over the last 4 or 5 years. So definitely it's very scary to think about. And just think about like whatever country you might be living in, whether it's the US or any other country. There's just lots of warnings coming out that countries are broke. They don't have the capacity to fight wars. And even the UK's like that right now. They've come out and reported that they were broke. And that also many warnings coming out from them that they just don't have the capacity to fight a war beyond like 2 or 3 months if they were to go to war with Russia. So lots of economies around the world, primarily in the West, is what it appears like, are not ready for a major war. So just imagine if this were to happen. That's why I wanted to share this information today. So that's going to be it for today's update, though. If you got something out of this, please smash that like button. Also, if you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing down below. Hit the notification bell. That way YouTube can notify you. And with that, hope you all have a great day. Everybody take care and God bless. See you in the next one.